Welcome to our podcast, The Trial of Sean Combs, Unresolved, the Diddy Cases. I'm Kelly Hyman. We are here with two amazing Daily Mail reporters. Kayla's in New York covering the trial, and Marjorie's in LA. So thank you guys so much for joining. It's so nice to have you guys on this show. Who is Diddy and what does he mean to the rapping world?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having us, Kelly. I don't think I can think of hip hop without thinking of Sean Diddy Combs. His influence is monumental in the world of hip hop, not only in music, but also the culture of hip hop. He's brought up stars like Usher, Mary J. Blige, of course, Notorious B.I.G. He essentially launched so many careers and has his hands on every influential music and business. He was a business mogul as well in Bad Boy Entertainment. So he was a huge part of the entertainment world. So to see him fall from grace has been uh, shocking, frankly.
Is there anything else you can think about his background or anything like that about, Sean Combs that people aren't familiar with? Like what else has he done?
Yeah, well, I'll take that one. Thanks for having me as well, Kelly. So I think one of the things about Diddy is that he's being held here in Brooklyn, and he is really this New York icon as well. Like Marjorie said, you can't think about hip hop without thinking of Diddy. One thing you really can't think of New York without thinking of Diddy either. Like he was really such a staple in, the hip hop New York community, which brought the likes of, Jay-Z and other really big stars as well. He branched out into Sean John. He had his own fashion line. So he was really just, his star was extremely powerful. And even if you didn't listen to his music or weren't really a fan, there was some type of influence that, there was some type of, influence that Diddy had over everyone, whether you knew it or not.
When I first think of him, I think of him as when he was dating J-Lo and them being in New
Yeah.
York. And that's exactly when
Yes.
I first remember him as someone who was raised in New York City of them and the iconic time that they were together and their relationship as well. Um, you
And I'm
guys,
sure you
Yeah.
heard of the white parties growing up in New York and being at the Hamptons. I'm sure you saw all the A-list celebrities who clamored to attend those parties with Diddy.
and so for people who are not familiar with the White Party, do you guys mind kind of explaining what that was, what era that was, kind of take us back in time to give a sense of what that was like?
I want to take that one.
Yeah. So, yeah, sure. So the Diddy White Party, it was the 4th of July party, typically in the Hamptons, which, is just a celebrity, rich money enclave of Long Island in New York. And they were very exclusive. Like everyone wanted to get invited to Diddy's party. It was every A-lister that you can think of, dressed, of course, in all white. And it was the bash of the summer. Now, to think of something equivalent, I would say today is Michael Rubin, the founder of Fanatics. He has a 4th of July white party. Actually, is it just 4th of July? It might just be. I'll take
I
that
think
back. Is it 4th of July?
he had some on the 4th of July, but he had other dates too where it would be a
Okay.
white party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Michael Rubin, not saying that anything, crazy has been going down at the Michael Rubin parties, but it's to that caliber. You see the biggest stars there, a Justin Bieber, a J Lo, and everyone who's anyone really wants to be there.
So now kind of more to the present time, how do you think the perception of him has changed since a lot of us are familiar with the video of him along with his former partner, Miss Ventura, appeared on TV? What do you think the thoughts are in regards to him now that that perception has been played out in the public?
I mean, anyone who I've spoken to have seen that video was frankly shocked at the um violent nature of what went down. And so, to anybody who hasn't seen it, you see Cassie Ventura, his former girlfriend, running in the hotel hallway. And this was at the Intercontinental here in LA back in 2016. And you can see her frantically trying to take the elevator. And Diddy comes rushing out with only a towel. And you see him grabbing her by the hair and dragging her. So first of all, it was shocking to see all of that. And prior to the CNN release that video, Cassie had actually settled her lawsuit with Diddy for an undisclosed amount. And so, and she described allegedly of the alleged actions and abuse that she's endured in their 10 plus year, I think 10-year relationship. And then seeing that actually play out on video, I think really was like a blow to the stomach for a lot of people, and people like me who was a big fan of hip hop. But and then he followed that with actually an apology uh, to what was seen in that video. So I think that really was the beginning of the crumbling of his empire. A lot of his friends, like Jay-Z, other big names, began to distance themselves from Diddy. And you know, it's and now obviously he's facing very serious allegations in criminal court.
Do you think at
Yeah, I
that?
think that
Oh,
video.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
uh, I think that video was really the turning point for people because when Cassie came out with that lawsuit, it still very much felt like a he said, she said type of thing. You know, these allegations are crazy, but they happened so long ago. You know, Diddy, of course, denied it. But once you saw that video, it was really undeniable. Like everyone saw it with their own eyes. And Marjorie, I think to your point, he did apologize after that. But I think that may be the only time in any of this that he's
Mhm.
admitted fault or admitted guilt. Because other than that, he's pleaded not guilty, emphatically denied all the allegations against him. So that really is a key moment in this whole case.
And why do you think that's a key moment? Do you think because there was the video and that could help substantiate what exactly happened? Or is it a turning point for him to say, yes, I did wrong, and I'm working on getting better? What do you guys think?
I think it's more of a turning point for the public because there's the proof. There's everything you need to see. It's no longer just someone's word against someone else's words. That is physical evidence, and for a lot of people, they need to see it to believe it. For Diddy himself, you know, is he now does he now feel like he needs to change? I don't know. Of course, he is, again, innocent until proven guilty. But I think, you know, if that video was never released, we would have never gotten an apology.
Yeah, and it looks like the prosecutors will or plan to use that video. But interestingly enough, he's being charged with 5 criminal counts of sex trafficking and racketeering, and that he uses Bad Boy, his business empire, to sexually abuse women. So he hasn't been charged with, say, battery, which is what we saw on that video. But I think the prosecutors might use it to show his propensity to exert his control over the alleged victims. So it will be interesting to see how that and how the jury will actually also react to the video. I'd be hard pressed to see anybody in New York who hasn't seen that video. So it'll be interesting to frankly see the faces of the jurors as they watch it, and what Diddy's own reaction will be as he's watching it in court.
But two wrongs don't make a right, right? To be devil's advocate, just because of what
Yeah,
happened in the past doesn't define, what someone does in the future or did
right.
based on these alleged allegations that he's tried with, right?
Right. There's evidence, what they call prior bad acts, and I think that's what the prosecutors are arguing to use that video. But again, his defense team, or I'm sure, will try to block that from the jury, from that video, and other possible other evidence and other witnesses from testifying against Diddy. to show his propensity to commit these crimes. But we'll see what exactly will be presented in court.
That's a good point. So, who do you guys think are going to be key witnesses for the prosecutors, and who do you think are going to be key witnesses for the defense?
Well, we know Cassie is definitely going to be on the stand, and she will actually be testifying under her own name. The other three victims, I think, are still going to be called as victim one, two, and three, or two, three, and four, I think. So, but definitely Cassie will be there. We're trying to figure out who exactly possible celebs who might be coming into play. Some people have said J-Lo might be on there as well. Jay-Z, who knows? I mean, that's why we are all clamoring to get inside that courtroom.
But I do think that if you're a celebrity, you're going to want to try to stay as
Oh,
far
yeah.
away from this trial as possible. You don't want your name in the same headline as Diddy at this point. It becomes a PR nightmare, whether you're testifying for him or against him. You kind of want to steer clear of this. But of course, if a celebrity is subpoenaed, they don't really have a choice. But as of now, we can only speculate who might be there. Other than that, maybe, former assistants, former bodyguards, people who were with Diddy at all times, anyone who helped manage his business. I think that those lesser known people will definitely be there.
That's a good point. Yes, for the prosecution, anyone that can help substantiate their case. So they bring these cases, they have the burden and they have to prove the case. So anyone that's going to help substantiate their case. Going to your point about J-Lo, is J-Lo going to be for the defendant? Just to show that he didn't do these things, that it wasn't going on when she was with him? Or is the prosecution going to call her as a witness? What do you guys think about that?
That's the $1 million question. I mean, obviously they had a long-term relationship, so it'll be interesting to see if the prosecutors do bring her on, what kind of questions they might try to get or answers to try to get out of her in terms of their relationship. Was he ever violent towards her? um we don't know. First of all, we don't know if she's going to be on the witness list, but it'll be a big day in court if J-Lo shows up, obviously.
No, going back to your point about the video of Miss Ventura, and it was painful to watch. Since you guys have investigated this, were there any types of, before that, allegations of any type of abuse or anything like that that you guys have uncovered through your investigation of P. Diddy?
I've spoken to old when he was just starting out in Bad Boy, actually even prior to Bad Boy, when he was in Uptown Records. It was more of him being very uh, belligerent in terms of the way he spoke to women in the office. I'm sorry, I have some background noise. You guys hear that? Sorry for
I
pause.
I
don't
can hear it.
know.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear it.
Sorry.
No.
So when I spoke to some women who had worked with him when he was in Uptown Records, they described him as this, he had this just brash bravado, and he would call women, he would drop the B word at women, and they alleged that he was just plainly disrespectful. And again, going back to the allegations that he's facing charges for, it's from, I believe, 2004 to 2024. So this that's a long time span. But even prior to that, there's always kind of these rumors that he was just a very difficult person to work for, and he would just turn on you at a dime with his sharp temper.
And I want us to all remember that there was a show called Making the Band
Yes.
where Diddy really showed off that type of bravado. And if anything, it was kind of highlighted as, this is what it takes to be in the music industry. You have to deal with tough personalities, and sometimes you will get spoken to in a way that you might not like. But if you want to be a star, this is what it takes. That was the idea of that show. So maybe it's behavior that now, would absolutely never fly on television,
Right.
whether or not Diddy is, charged with anything or not. But I think a lot of that type of behavior was really out in the open. And like a lot of people do say that the stuff that allegedly went on was an open secret and it was stuff that everyone just kind of knew about and brushed off and felt like the norm.
For some people, some of our viewers that are not familiar with that show, can you kind of explain the premise of the show, what it entailed, who came out of it, just to give some more information about it?
Yeah, so Making the Band was in the early, 2000s, a
Yeah.
show about, as the title suggests, making the band. So there was a girl group called Danity Kane of five women who it started out with a big group. These women auditioned, they sang, they danced, and then they would dwindle it down to you finally get your five. And it was like a boot camp, basically. And they ended up making some incredible music. Their songs went on, their music videos went on to, be highly regarded. But if you watch that show, their tears, their sweat, I don't know if there was any blood, but it definitely was a grueling process. And it kind of idolized that process that, it felt like these women now deserved Diddy's praise because they put up with all of that. And then there was another band that came out of that, a boy band group called Day 26.
Interestingly enough, one of the members of Danity Kane, Don Richard, also filed a civil lawsuit against him. And she mentions, her experience while she was in making the band and in Danity Kane, how he allegedly would take advantage of overworking them and also, frankly, sexually assaulting her.
Is that case set to go to trial? That sounds horrific.
I think that right now, I'm not quite sure when the trial date is for Don Richard's case against Diddy. Obviously, he has to tackle this big criminal case, and it's not only Don Richard's case that he has to tackle. There's probably more than 30 civil lawsuits filed against Diddy in California, New York, and Florida. So, but right now, the president is the criminal case.
Do you think the civil cases are going to play a role in the criminal one, or the criminal one is going to play a role in the civil case?
I think both. I think what both sides, with the prosecution and the defense, are fighting over is whether or not some of those people who have filed lawsuits, civil lawsuits against Diddy, could be called to the stand during his criminal case. And again, some of those alleged victims could be the prior bad acts witnesses that prosecutors might use them to show his propensity to be violent, to have committed sexual assaults that are not named or related to the actual charges that he's facing. So, and they're still, I'm sure they're going to argue over that in court, whether or not who gets to be on that witness list.
What are you looking for and anticipating during the trial?
I think what everyone is really looking to see is cold to hard evidence of, this abuse or this alleged abuse. There's been said to be videos of these alleged freak off parties that happened at Diddy's house. I mean, of course, it seems like these are going to be very graphic videos, graphic photos that no one really wants to see. But to prove the state's case or Diddy's case, those will have to come forward.
Anything else that you want to share with our viewers about Diddy or the trial, something you think that they should know or be aware of?
One of the interesting things that just came out is Diddy is actually using jail commissary to make it through before trial dates. What was it, Kayla, that he was selling or
It's a
trading mackerel?
$1 tin can of mackerel is now his currency behind bars. So that just shows you the fall from grace from, eating caviar and whatever he wants at the drop of a dime to now being forced to, trade canned fish. So whether, he is convicted or not, I think there is kind of the reputational harm kind of has been done. Um, so there is a big lifestyle change ahead of him, whether it's the rest of his days are behind bars or he does get out.
And even if he does get out, I mean, he's facing so many other allegations in those civil cases. I don't know how many years it'll take to go through all of those civil cases. Of course, some of them may be dismissed or dropped, but this is not going, it's going to be a few years for Diddy in and out of court.
Yeah. And I do also think that when you think about Hollywood and you think about, the 2017 Me Too movement and, the Harvey Weinstein case, the Bill Cosby case, that this does feel like another case of a very high powered bad actor finally getting brought to justice.
Yeah. And let's not also forget the alleged victims in this that I've spoken to a few who don't want to come forward, frankly, because they are still afraid of retaliation or something bad will happen to them. So having someone like Cassie actually testify under her own name, I think will be a big part of the trial. And and other alleged victims who are going to watch her will see. And they might also be re-traumatized by that. But just seeing it all play out in court, and being in the same room as him, I think will be a very interesting dynamic.
Do you think he's going to be convicted?
Ah, I will have to see all the evidence first before I actually make that call.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same, Marge.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you being here. Dr. Kimberly Mehlman-Orozco is a renowned human trafficking expert and author of Hidden in Plain Sight, American Slaves of the New Millennium Doctor. What is the definition of human trafficking?
So when we're talking about human trafficking, typically we're looking at the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, also known as the TVPA, and it defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, coercion, deception, or threat for the purpose of exploitation or the exploitation of anyone under the age of 18. And that last part is key, is because if a child, for example, is induced into the commercial sex industry, you don't have to show that they were forced or defrauded. They're de facto a victim of trafficking if they had been induced into the commercial sex industry. But typically, really what we're looking at in the definition of trafficking is modern slavery.
And doctor, how close is that definition to this case coming with P. Diddy?
So I think it'll be a precedent-setting case. I think the ladies and gentlemen of this jury are really going to tell us with their verdict what they conceptualize, whether they feel that the allegations rise to the level of modern slavery and human trafficking. What we typically see in a trafficking situation, and the reason why I say these allegations are atypical, is because modern slavery usually involves a victim who has had their food controlled, their housing controlled, their transportation controlled, denied access to healthcare. They're having their money taken from them. And I don't see those allegations in this case. I see that there are allegations of these sexual parties, these freak-offs where there were sexual exchanges, but it doesn't look like there was necessarily money exchange for a commercial sex act. And although there is the allegation that there were commercial sex providers that were introduced to these parties, but that's a very different dynamic and nuance than what we see in a typical trafficking situation. So again, I think that paying attention to the verdict in this case, it's going to be precedent setting of how America sees modern slavery and how that understanding and definition has evolved over time.
And doctor, from a human trafficking perspective, based on this federal statute, does there have to be some kind of knowing or should have known on the part of the defendant?
I think that the knew or should have known is going to be very, very difficult, because I think that they presented potentially as consenting participants. They presented as girlfriends at times. For example, Cassie was a girlfriend of P. Diddy. She walked the red carpet of his, but we also saw a video of her being beaten in a hallway. And so there's this dichotomy of what that relationship looked like. Was it exploitative? What is it modern slavery? Or was it a consensual adult romantic relationship that simply did involve elements of domestic violence? And I think that's one of the things the defense team is going to really hone down on, that Diddy maybe is not, he's not a good person in the sense he did commit a crime. It's on videotape. He committed a violent act against a woman, but I think that they're going to argue that it doesn't rise to the level of being modern slavery.
But he's not charged with, in the federal indictment, with what transpired in the video with him and Miss Ventura. Isn't that correct?
He is not charged, and there might be reasons why, as far as statute of limitations of whether they're going to charge him with a domestic violence act. However, I do think that that video will be part of this trial. I think it will be evidence that is played to the jury. They're going to want the jury to be made aware of. And quite frankly, the defense also might talk about this video in the opening statements. They might say, you're going to see video of him committing a violent act against a romantic partner, against a girlfriend of his. That it's horrible, and he's apologized for that, and he's paid for that in civil court through settlements. Who knows what they're going to say, but I think that they're going to have a mea culpa. They're going to acknowledge that wrongdoing, but they're going to say that it doesn't rise to the level of being trafficking, of modern slavery. And I think that from what we've seen in court filings, they've made similar arguments, and they've also talked about how they believe that he's being charged with a trafficking offense specifically targeted because he is a celebrity. And I think they've also, focused on the racial element. Human trafficking in the United States prior to the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, it was once called white slavery, and it was very racialized. I mean, this is a known fact. The application of this law, of these types of laws, have a long history of racialized applications. So there is some nuance and there's some truth to what their arguments are, but whether a jury is going to buy it in application to this case, I think that remains to be seen. And that's really what we're going to be looking at as far as the verdict and what comes out of this case.
What else do you think you're going to see from the prosecution in the opening statements, and what else witnesses are they going to bring on in order to prove their case?
I think you're absolutely going to see expert witnesses. I think that you're going to see expert witnesses from a psychological standpoint explaining, for example, well, if these individuals were victims, why didn't they run away? Why didn't they ask for help sooner? Why didn't they end the relationship? Why are there text messages of them, exchanging, having loving exchanges? I think that's going to be certainly an element. And you're going to have people who are going to talk about trauma bonding. I think that you likely, just because of the allegations of drugging, there probably will be somebody who focuses on maybe a chemist or somebody to talk about whether people were under the influence of drugs consensually, whether they were drugged, the contents of anything that they got from the house, whether there were drugs, and individuals who have some expertise in that regard. So forensic psychologist, for certain. I think that there likely will be fact witnesses that are going to talk about their exchanges and relationships with P. Diddy, as far as how was he as an individual to work with? Was he manipulative? Did he engage in fraud or deceit or threat? I know that in other coverage of this case, they focused on the allegations that he had involvement with the murder of Tupac Shakur. So I don't know if that will be allowed to be brought in, but I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility. I think that you also could see statements brought in from other celebrities. I know very famously Amber Rose, who's known to admitted that she attended these parties and said that she never saw anything untoward. She never saw any freak off or any party where individuals were being drugged. And so you likely might see celebrity witnesses talking about what they experienced, what they saw, and how many of these parties they attended. I think that there's certainly voluminous evidence with regards to emails, text messages that will probably be facts that will put before a jury.
Since the prosecution is very well prepared, what do you think the defense strategy is, and who do you see as potential witnesses for the defense?
I think for the defense and what their strategy is, I think that we've seen with some of the motion filings, like focusing on the fact that, you know, they're going to try to portray this as a targeting of P. Diddy because he is a famous, wealthy Black male. I think that's certainly an argument that they're going to make. I think that they're likely going to have witnesses that attended those parties and that potentially didn't see anything out of character for a celebrity party at that time and during the years in which these parties were occurring, that they didn't see any kind of freak off in the sense of they didn't see individuals who were being drugged against their will or participating in commercial sex acts against their will. And I think that that might be a lot of what they focus on. With how fervently and zealously they're defending this case, I think that they likely believe that they have evidence to undermine the prosecution's case as far as text messages, maybe videos of showing them together having fun, going on vacations, receiving extravagant gifts, showing a lifestyle that ostensibly looks like it was consenting and consenting adults. And I think that they're likely going to also focus on doing jury research to see what types of jurors might be more judgmental for the swinger lifestyle and individuals engaging in sexual escapades that are just out of the norm of the average person versus those who really might not be as judgmental. And as we know, there has been an evolving standard of decency of what's acceptable. I mean, if you look at even just celebrities in the 1950s, Elvis married a teenage wife, and that was not viewed as problematic as I think it is today. And so it really is going to be a lot of research on their end in organizing these materials, not just the witnesses that they're going to put on the stand that potentially were present. And quite frankly, a lot of these witnesses might be afraid to be involved. I mean, they don't want the target to come to them next. So again, it really is going to be interesting to see who, if anyone, decides to testify on behalf of the defense and what they're going to say.
Do you think the jury's going to find him guilty or not guilty, and why?
Honestly, I really don't know at this point. I think that it is, I think it's very difficult to predict for a number of reasons. I think that if you were a traditionalist and if you were looking at what the intent was behind trafficking statutes, I don't think that a jury would find him guilty because I don't think that, from what I've seen, that it rises to the level of modern slavery in that regard. With that being said, though, I think that I have seen juries start to redefine and put a different lens on these types of allegations that are expanding that definition. So what an jury, I think it was filed in New York, correct? So what a New York jury is going to determine, I really don't know. But I think that it really could swing either way at this point.
We'll be waiting and to see what exactly happens. Doctor, thank you so much for your time and expertise. We really appreciate you and your wisdom. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in to our next episode.